He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast View with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to Coast View. As I've said every day, this is a show that's dedicated to the men and women who are making a difference here in coastal Mississippi to make this a better place to live, work, and play. Today, I've got a super special guest. There's so much to learn from Christy Pickering. Her book on courage, I'm holding it up so the camera can see it, is about her 20 years of emotional and physical abuse in her marriage and how she ultimately found her voice, how she ultimately took action, and then what's so amazing as she continues her journey, how she found happiness. But what she can't be defined by that story. Because the other part of Christy that is so amazing is that aside from that, her professional success and her incredible commitment to community is incredibly impressive all by itself, without the weight of the story revealed in her book, Courage. In short, Christy is an amazing woman with a story to tell about commitment to community and how you can build significant success in your life and your chosen career and your business by using your work in the community to help inspire you. She has an inspirational story to tell about her abusive relationship. Her message, though, is one of hope. It's about listening. It's about when you're in an abusive relationship. It's about finding your voice. It's about telling people your story. And don't let anyone stop you. So we'll talk a little bit more about if you're an abused person, there's something for you to learn in this conversation. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Christy Pickering with us here this morning. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited about this show, Christy, because as a publisher, you move fast, and it seemed like I always was dealing with some kind of disaster, Katrina obviously very, very much up there, but it didn't afford me the opportunity to dive into the essence of the people that I got to know. I've known you for a long time. We knew each other through community work or whatever.
Absolutely.
The community award that you won, the Sun Herald top community award winner. But what ultimately was important about doing the show that I didn't expect to get was really understanding the essence of who people are. And your story is so inspiring. We're early in this journey, but I hope we're able to convey to some extent why people should pay attention to this show and look for the inspiration. I hope people are getting something from that.
I'm sure they are. I've just watched a few of them, and I'm telling you, it's a wonderful show. You're a natural, but you're doing the coast a great service by doing this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope so. Your success is incredible. You formed your own CPA firm in 1991. You currently serve on 2 corporate boards. Any corporate board today, because of Sarbanes-Oxley and all that came with that, could be consuming by itself. But you are members of 2 boards, Mississippi Power and Hancock Whitney. In fact, if you think about both of those boards, there's a lot going on in both of those companies, especially Hancock Whitney with the merger and all that's happening there. Yes. You're involved in their audit committee. You've grown your CPA firm to be a multifaceted firm. You do so many different things. It's probably not at all what you expected it to be when you formed it.
It has morphed over the years.
So what is the status of your firm right now?
Okay, well, in my early years, I started the firm by myself, and then my ex-husband joined me. So there were 2 of us. Mm-hmm. But for many, many years, it's been only me and an assistant. And that's it. But I started with auditing. When I first started my work in accounting, I was working for a firm in Houston, and I worked in auditing. And then I moved into tax preparation, decided I liked that better. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing litigation support work where I get hired as a forensic expert, either by the courts or by the plaintiff attorneys or the defending attorneys. But I love that work. It's very interesting. But I still do the tax work, and that's just that's what I do these days.
So tax season is still really, really busy for you.
It is not quite as busy as it was before. I have a smaller group of clients now because I give them, I don't just do tax returns.
Yes.
We meet quarterly, and I try to give them, more instead of just a tax return.
Yeah, so that's kind of the change in the CPA field. I mean, when I hired chief financial officers in my company, it's no longer about just doing the accounting work. It's about being a strategic partner.
Right.
So that's sort of what you are to these businesses you represent.
Absolutely.
So where does this fire, this burning inside you, come from?
Well, I have to say it started with my father. My father adopted my twin brother and I. He married my mother, and he gave us his name. And he is a fabulous man. He told me from the time I can remember that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. If I just wanted to work hard enough and long enough to do it, that anything could be in my path.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten it. And he always wanted me to make him proud. If we came home and I had a 96A on a math test, he'd say, "What happened with the other 4 points?" I mean, he wanted excellence.
Right.
And so all my life, I've wanted to make my dad proud. He made me want to do that. And but it just, and I like the challenge of doing different things. And that's why you've seen that I've done kind of different things. I take on a new challenge and think, well, I've never done that before. That might be interesting,
I want to get into this in the last segment because I really want to zero in on your community work and why that's important and why we need leadership, et cetera. We'll go there. But for this point in the conversation, though, I want to make the point that what impresses me about you, Christy, is that during the time that you were in this abusive relationship that your book Courage talks about, during that time, you were still furthering your career. You were still involved unbelievably well in the community. And in fact, it was your involvement in the community that did many things. One is it taught you the importance of the community. It helped you learn, you developed relationships that became business relationships, and you were inspired by people that you were working with in the community to actually open your own CPA firm. So it's amazing to me that you did all of that simultaneously. and I might add, you had kids during this time.
I did. But when I first moved here, I first will tell you this. I want to start. I got here as soon as I could.
Yeah.
I love the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I love Mississippians. Our people are so wonderful. So I joined the chamber. Was the first thing I did. Joined the chamber and joined the Biloxi Rotary Club, and just really got to know a lot of the movers and shakers on the coast. And somehow, some way, they picked me as a member of the very first Leadership Gulf Coast class. And I didn't even know really what that was. But the people that were in that class were just, a lot of them were the movers and shakers on the coast. And it was just the greatest opportunity for me to get my feet on the ground and start working in the community.
Would you? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one more thing.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, the thing that I saw differently back then in 1989 was it looked like one big coast to me, one big city. And we talk a lot about that these days, but they didn't back then.
Yes.
Back then, DeBees Road was a line,
it was,
right?
Yes.
Between Gulfport and Biloxi.
Yes.
And I remember there was a discussion, kind of a heated discussion about where the new library would go between Gulfport and Biloxi, and I was at a cocktail party, and I said something about it. I just thought, what does it really matter? We're all one coast, and back then I didn't realize, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? But I love that we have become more of that one coast attitude, and I think that's what's most important about what we need to go forward. We have to support each other.
So we'll get there in that last segment, but Roland always said to me early in my career, he said, Ricky, until we find our common voice, until we find it, Jackson's never going to have to pay attention to us, because the reality is we're always going to be fighting amongst ourselves, and we're going to drown out each other's voices, and they're not going to have to pay any attention to us.
That is so true.
And you experienced that when you came here. You understood what that stood for.
Yep, I sure did.
So your business success, when you look back on your business success, did you exceed your expectations? Did you have any idea that you would end up being this strategic partner with so many businesses?
Yes and no. Yes. When I look back, sometimes I'm like, who is that? I can't believe I did all that at once. There were, sometimes many boards going on when I had IHL, Mississippi Power, and Hancock Whitney all at the same time. That was a lot of work with an accounting practice with one owner. But I always set new goals, and I think I'm always going to be like that. I'm always going to say, okay, now I've done that. Good. That's great. Now what can I do next?
Right.
And I'm still doing that.
Right.
And I'm 59 years old, and don't see that stopping.
I see that in a common theme with everyone that I'm talking to, and that is this never a willingness to accept where you are at this moment in time. Even with Jerry St. Pay that I talked to earlier this week, 80 years old, and he hasn't stopped yet. It's unbelievable.
He's amazing. He's inspirational.
He's a living legend.
Exactly.
That's what he is. He's a living legend. So we've talked about you coming to the coast, your business success. In the last segment, as I mentioned, we'll talk about your community involvement. But in this next segment, I really want to zero in on your book, Courage. I can't thank you enough for sharing that with me. I had no idea that so many people, not just women, but people struggle in abusive relationships. And your message for them is so hopeful. I hope that we can inspire just one by virtue of doing this show. So when we come back, we're going to talk about her book, Courage, and this sort of dual life that she led for so long. We'll be back right after this with Christy Pickering.
Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Twitter at Super Talk MSGC.
His love for the coast is why he's here. It's Coast View with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View, and we're talking with Christy Pickering, whose professional story, whose community story, you could write a book about. Forget about the pain that she's had in her life that led to her writing an amazing book about her journey called Courage. Here's the book here. It's available on Amazon. Christy, so let's give them sort of a feel for what this book is about.
It is my story of living in a 21-year abusive relationship. I do tell the story because I want others to know that I do know what it feels like. It is not about bashing my ex-husband at all. It is about sharing what I learned so that others won't make my mistakes. That is my whole goal. I want people to understand what abuse is, what it looks like, what it feels like. I want them to know how I got out safely, how I suggest to people that they go through certain steps to get out safely. It's not advocating divorce at all, but if an abuser will not change, and then you owe it to yourself and to your children to get out.
You write in your book when you were at Southern Miss that when your husband and you came together, you were like Barbie and Ken. Mm-hmm. It was seemingly the perfect.
Yes. He was the president of his fraternity. I was the president of my sorority, and he was getting his master's in business, and I was getting my degree in accounting, and we just knew we were going to go out and just have this perfect life. Mm-hmm. And it couldn't have been.
It seemed so that way in the beginning, but it was like suddenly you saw a signal, and it made you think, wow, what is that? And you didn't know what to make of it in the beginning, and then it happened again, and then it's like the boiling water. It just slowly but surely over a number of years.
And I use that analogy when I give my speeches. Mm-hmm. I use that analogy. People say, well, why don't you just leave? Why didn't you leave immediately? They don't understand. An abuser doesn't punch you on the first date. If they did, you wouldn't stay in, right? Yes. They're not stupid, okay? They start with controlling. They start, they look for a quick commitment. They try to separate you from friends and family. So that's kind of how it starts. Mm-hmm. And then they use different tactics, mm-hmm. and they escalate. They don't start with the physical. They mm-hmm. usually start with verbal abuse, mm-hmm. and then there's psychological abuse, financial abuse, can be sexual abuse, mm-hmm. and finally, physical abuse. Mm-hmm. And but they do it systematically, and they're not always mean, mm-hmm. and that's what keeps you in for so long. Mm-hmm. They're not mean. They can be wonderful for 28 days in the month, and then the last 2 days they turn into a monster, and you mm-hmm. think, who have I married? Mm-hmm. And so that's how it escalates and mm-hmm. just slowly morphs over time. So yes, and And abusers are usually narcissists. Most abusers are narcissists, which means the most important thing to them is themselves, right? So they like what the abuse gets them their way all the time. So they can excuse themselves for those abuses and keep doing it. But they don't want anybody outside the marriage to think they're like that. So they're wonderful outside of your four walls and behind, when they come out from behind the closed doors. They're wonderful. And everybody in our community thought he was wonderful.
Yeah. It was so complicated because, we can dive deep. We don't have so much time to do this. But the thing that really impressed me about you, though, is that in spite of you experiencing what you were experiencing, when you found success in your life, what people don't realize is that he was trying to figure out always what was in this for him.
Absolutely.
Always, whether it was joining a board, whether it was starting the firm, he was always trying to angle for what was in it for him. So the abuse was not just at home. It was just in every aspect of your life.
It was. It was all day long. And that was one of the reasons that I jumped into chamber membership. Yeah. And I chaired the Seafood Festival 2 years. I did all that because it gave me an outlet. Yes. I needed an outlet outside of my home.
And as and then it's coincidentally it created, as Jerry talked about, as John talked about, it created for you reps in the community that said, wow, I mean, this time is not lost. I'm actually able to find myself outside of the home in the situation that you were in. And you were learning during that time what makes a great community, what makes a great business, what's the relationship between my future business and the community. It's incredible that you were able to find those connections in spite of the fact that you had pain.
Yeah, it was, and part of that is I had a wonderful family growing up.
Yes.
Wonderful family. And my father always taught me that your glass should be half full.
Yeah.
It's all about perspective, like Stephen Covey says. What is your perspective? So, yes, there were horrible things that happened. I tried to always find happiness somewhere else.
Yes.
In my children, in my work in the community, So I just looked for those opportunities.
So you ultimately took control of your life.
I did.
And what I want you to do, if you will, turn with me, please, to Reflections. What a beautiful part of your book.
Oh, thank you.
Would you please read that one paragraph? Because this is, if you've ever been involved in an abusive relationship, or if you're in one now, listen carefully to the next few minutes. Go ahead.
I am under no illusions about the fact that there are many forms that abuse can take, and that my story, sadly, is just one of them. Some people have experienced far greater abuse, some far less. The extent of the abuse isn't the point. It's that it still exists, and it shouldn't. And it is happening all the time right under our noses, and usually off the radar until someone dies, or is badly hurt, or, as in my case, finds their way out. Even when you find your way out, you carry your scars with you. Abuse changes a person in fundamental ways, but it does not determine your future. Only you get to do that. You get to decide whether it is going to be a roadblock or a stepping stone to something better.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And you go on to talk about, which, you and I had this conversation offline, but the importance of finding your voice, the importance of telling your story, and then really importantly, not letting anyone stop you from doing that. Talk about that.
The reason that I started doing the speeches at universities when I started speaking out and finding my voice, the reason I did that is because I realized that other people needed to know that people have a definition for what an abused woman should look like. It can happen to anyone. Mm-hmm. It can happen to anyone, and I wanted them to know that I if I need to speak about this for my own healing, but also it helped others to heal. Yes. Because people would come up to me out of the audience and tell me that they had suffered it and they'd never spoken about it, and now they thought they would. Mm-hmm. And I told them 2 reasons to do that. It's healing for you, and evil dies in the light. Mm-hmm.
So then ultimately, learning to tell your story and learning and not letting anyone stop you, what did you mean by not letting anyone stop you?
Not anyone take your voice away. Mm-hmm. That's what I meant.
So what did you learn about abuse in terms of how widespread it is, how proliferating it is? There's so much we don't know, isn't it?
Right. And a lot of people think that when you talk about abuse, you're really talking about women. Mm-hmm. That's not true. Mm-hmm. Men have come up to me and given me horrendous stories. It can happen to anyone. More it's more women is what the statistics are. But people just, they don't understand why they stay. One thing I'd like to make a point about, people stay for several reasons. They may not have the finances to get out. They may need health insurance that their husband has or wife has, and they can't get out. They may think they're staying for the children, but you shouldn't stay for the children, because if that person will not change, your child will emulate that parent. Mm-hmm. And it's a chain of abuse. There really is a chain of abuse.
So when you started to leave, when you started the process to leave, you developed a plan.
I did.
So that would be, I think, important for someone to hear. What do you mean by the plan?
Okay, I tell people always plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Mm-hmm. So he had told me he would kill me 10 years before I left, and I believed it. Mm-hmm. He said if I left him, he'd kill me, and I'd never get the children. So I wrote, the night before I left, I wrote a letter to him, and I put it on the counter after he had gone to work, and the letter said I wanted a 6-month separation. Mm-hmm. I had already, and then on the way leaving, I left the house, packed the kids' clothes, went to my sister's house, but I had called the sheriff, who I knew. I called the chief of police and said, if you get a call from this number, it's serious. And I really did think he was going to kill me. Mm-hmm. So I watched my back for about 3 months, and he did stalk me some, but he did not, there was no violence, but except for the night before I left, where he held a knife at my throat, which was scary. But you have to plan for the worst. Don't think that they're not going to do something crazy. And giving him that 6 months, I knew I'd never go back, because I knew it could be worse, but I wanted him to get used to the idea. So I thought it was a good way to let him just work his way into it.
So what has, in the last minute before we go to a break, what has writing this book done for you and beyond just you? What are some of the impacts of this book?
Oh, I know that I've helped people get away from abusers. I mean, women who I've talked through how to get out safely, I've done that. For me, just helping other people, giving hugs. I speak to the Girls State at Hattiesburg when they have this annual get-together for Girls State, and I speak to them, and I give out 30 or 40 hugs every year for young women that are crying. Either their mother's experiencing it or they're experiencing it. That's what it's done for me, is to know that I have a purpose for my 21 years.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Well, what an incredible story. I can't tell you how much it inspires me to want to figure out what part maybe I can do through this radio station or through this show to bring more attention to it and to show people there is a way out. Don't feel trapped. Find your story and take action. Develop a plan. Find someone who can help you. Don't be alone. Right. There's always a tomorrow, and as you pointed out, you can find happiness.
You can, and I'm available on my website. They can call me anytime.
Good.
I will talk to anybody.
That's awesome. Okay, so thank you, Christy, for that part of the conversation. When we come back, we're going to talk about the community.
This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View, and we're having just a very inspiring conversation with Christy Pickering. Christy, before we move on to the community, I want to make sure that we are telling people how they can get your book. Okay. Courage. Tell us about that.
It's on Amazon. Mm-hmm. You can get it on Amazon, and it is available on Kindle and in paperback. I do want to make this point. If you are giving it to someone who's in an abusive relationship, it's better to give it to them on Kindle.
Yes.
Because the cover tells the story.
Yes.
Okay, just for safety purposes. Yes. But and then also, a Southern Bound bookstore in Biloxi will be carrying it, and the Hillier House in Ocean Springs.
Good. Thank you. Okay. So we talked about reps in the community, and I've talked about how you had multifaceted learnings from it. One helped you start your business. One helped you get your reps in, like John and Jerry and I talked about. You continue those relationships today, but what happened as a result of getting your reps in, your awareness about the role leadership plays. You started at the chamber, like so many people do. You became, a board member for the IHL. Tell us about your journey and what you learned along the way and how important leadership is.
Thank you. I started in the chamber and chaired several committees, the Seafood Festival for 2 years, which is a big undertaking. One time I was 8 months pregnant. But anyway, and then joined the Rotary Club and met a lot of people through that. But I started to see how a community could thrive if people really worked together. And that's what I saw. And I learned that it really does take commitment from people, to just volunteer, to do good in the community if we're really going to be the best that we can be. And so I wanted to set that example and do that. And so I really enjoyed that. I met George Slogel when I was lucky enough to be chosen for the Leadership Gulf Coast class, the inaugural class, and he was the facilitator for the economic day, and he sat down beside me.
For people who don't know George,
okay,
we'll be introducing George in the coming weeks, but tell them who he is.
Well, he was the president and the CEO and then chairman of the board of Hancock Bank, and so I knew him for years.
And then after he retired,
and then he was the mayor of Gulfport, and but his resume would be a mile long if I told you everything that he did. He was chairman of the Infinity Math and Science Center in Hancock County. He has done so much for the community. He's just a wonderful man. And I met him by happenstance because he sat down beside me on this bus, and I was this young 29-year-old, and we were talking a little bit, and I just thought he was really the greatest guy. About 6 months later, he calls me and asks me if I will help him with that economic day every year with Leadership Gulf Coast. So I said, sure, great. So I help him with that. And then he inspired me to move on. And he, in 1995, asked me if I would join the Hancock Bank Board, which was wonderful. It has been such a wonderful opportunity for me to grow and to learn how a board works and how a board that is overseen by the SEC, what you have to do. It's just been wonderful. And then from that, I met Anthony Topazzi, who was the CEO of Mississippi Power Company. He was on our Hancock board, and he needed a financial expert on his board. So he asked me to join that board. The way things worked was kind of crazy. And then when the IHL, Institutions of Higher Learning, every 4 years they would put every 3 years they put 4 more trustees on the board. Governor Barber called George Slogel, and he called Anthony Topazzi and asked them if they knew a woman in South Mississippi who was a USM grad who knew how a board worked and should work, because he needed another person for the IHL board. And so Governor Barber chose me because of that. So just the way things have worked. And then the public speaking about abuse and getting the courage to do that came from knowing these presidents of these universities and them allowing me to come to their campus and kind of get my feet wet, and they've been wonderful. So it's been a crazy transgression.
So John Harrison, in the conversation when he talked about these moments in time where someone selects you, someone identifies you, you oftentimes don't deserve it. Maybe somebody else deserved it more. That's his humbling way of saying he probably deserved it because he was quite the rising star. But there are these moments in our lives. Rick Carter and Terry Green talked about it. Jerry St. Pé talked about helping the guy who ran out of gas, and the next morning he's having an interview with this guy. I had no idea that it was the same guy. There are these maybe divine intervention moments where we meet someone who changes the trajectory of our career.
Absolutely.
And unless you're active in the community, unless you're out there learning, unless you're finding those mentors, how are you going to take advantage of those moments?
Exactly.
That's what happened to you, isn't it?
It is. And Jerry St. Pé, I'd known him because he had served on the Mississippi Power Company board before he moved up to the Southern Company board. When I wrote the book, I knew he had written a book. So I called him and asked him to read it, and he gave me such great advice. He was a mentor to me.
Yeah. So when I left here, I went to be publisher of the Press Register in Mobile and then president of a company that had Birmingham and Huntsville. Well, Anthony had left here to go to be involved in operations for Southern Company, and he was, I think he spent the majority of his time in Birmingham.
Yes.
And so he reaches out to me in Mobile, so we sort of continued our relationship over there. And I watched him, unfortunately, he died of ALS,
yes.
But he had this slow, just sad situation. We actually met with him not long before he died at his home in Birmingham. George and a few of us went to visit with him. And you know what he showed me, Christy?
What?
He pulled out his iPad. And you remember did you see him?
I went up there also, and the way he could communicate by using the iPad.
So he grabbed his iPad and he struggled with pulling up a picture, and the picture he pulled up was a picture of himself and Haley and me together, And he wanted me to see that. And he was wanting me to be, he was so proud of that. I wish people could really understand how much of a role Anthony DePazzi played in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. It was
amazing.
I mean, he was a bull in the china shop, but if we had not had his enormous leadership capabilities and influence, we may not have been able to accomplish everything we accomplished.
Absolutely. He got those lights on quickly, and it was a heroic effort to
Yes.
do that. And it was just what they had to do. People don't understand the behind the scenes, just having places for these people to stay that came in to help all the linemen, and feeding them and housing them. It was crazy.
And then there was the forming of the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal.
Absolutely.
And Anthony's area of responsibility there was he was the vice chairman over infrastructure. That was, there were very few things that were more important in the moment than understanding what we were going to do to recover the infrastructure of coastal Mississippi.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as you know, we were able to ultimately, Governor Barber and working with our legislative delegation was able to get billions of dollars to rebuild that infrastructure. But it was Anthony that was at the spearhead of that moment. Amazing leader. I'm so sad that he's passed on.
I am too.
What other mentors, affected you in your life during that time?
Well, there've been so many. My biggest ones were George Slogel, Jerry St. Pé, but I've also had people like.
You told me one that this person is a customer, so you're not going to mention the customer's name. But this person is responsible for you actually forming your own practice.
Yes, and it was my very first client. It's a business here on the coast. I don't usually talk about my clients. They're wonderful. But when I hesitated about telling you, some of these people are my clients. And so I was hesitating. I was like, I don't usually do that. But there have been so many people on the coast. I don't even think I could name all of them.
So what advice, now that you've had this experience, what advice do you have for young people that are coming along in terms of what role they should play in the community, how they should view their involvement in the community?
I would say get involved early in your career. And it's the right thing to do, first of all, for your community, but you'll be amazed at how much you will receive from giving like that. And I would say do that early. Just the chamber is a great place to start. It really is, because there's so many opportunities. You can pick whether you want to do a seafood festival or if you want to be in economic development or what area you want to be in. I'd also say, get involved, know your legislators, know the coast delegation. And if you know them, they can tell you and inspire you and give you ideas of where the needs are. So I would say get to know them. They want to know you,
So when we come back after the break, I want to talk a little bit more about One Coast and why that conversation is so important. And I would also like to just think about it. What is it? What else do we want to share with the audience about your life that maybe we haven't gotten to? I also want to hear from you about how writing your book changed the way people perceive you in the community. Did things change for you? And then I want to talk about what's next for you. You've had an incredible career. Like with Jerry, I don't think there's any stop for you in your near future, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about your future. So anyway, we've got Christy Pickering here with us today. She wrote an amazing book called Courage. She owns her own CPA firm. She's on a couple of corporate boards. She's active in the community. She's really an inspiration. So after the break, we're going to continue the conversation, and hope you're having a great day. Back to you after this break.
Subscribe for free to the Coast View podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This This is Coast View with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast View. We've got Christy Pickering here, who is very accomplished in her career, wrote an amazing book called Courage about an abusive relationship. And we're going to continue the conversation in this last segment. But Christy, did writing the book change perception of you? What were you most concerned about and what happened?
And great question. My biggest concern was, and the reason I kept this story secret for a long time is because it was many, many years after I'd left my ex-husband that I wrote the book. I was afraid people would see me as weak. Here I am, a woman in the community, a businesswoman. I thought my fellow directors on these public boards that I sit on would see me as weak. I was worried about that. Mm-hmm. I wanted people to see me as a strong, independent woman. But I decided I had to write the book. I just had to do it. And so I did it and just prayed that everything would work out, and it did. And to my surprise, those directors, these men that I served on these boards with, would come up to me and say, "I never knew you were so strong."
Wow. That's
amazing.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
So, so you would have written it anyway.
I would have written it anyway. I would have.
But what it tells you about the human spirit and people's ability to understand, and certainly the people that you serve on boards with, they're all incredible people. And as human beings, they're interested in this conversation because they don't want abuse. They don't want it in the community. They don't want it in their companies.
Right.
And they saw, I'm sure, as I would have seen, if I were still CEO of a company sharing this story, that you have the opportunity to inspire people inside my company and maybe help them. And that's a wonderful message.
Yes, it's a health. There a lot of companies do things with physical health. They have weight weigh-ins and stuff like that. They encourage their employees to live a healthy life, but they don't do a lot with the mental health. Yes. And I've spoken in a corporate setting a couple times now, and when I've done that, it has been amazing how many people have come up to me, and that in one of my presentations, 50% of the audience was male. Wow. And this was not a requirement that they come. Yes. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And one of the men came up to me with tears in his eyes because he had a neighbor that was suffering from abuse. Mm-hmm. So everybody needs some help talking about this.
So briefly, let's circle back on one thing. Okay. One Coast. When you came here, your perception of this was that it was one place. You learned different, but you also learn when we work together, amazing things can happen. Tell a little bit about that.
Okay. First, I'll say this. I didn't grow up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but I tell people I got here as soon as I could, and I do love Mississippi. And so for me, coming here at the age of 29, the coast looked like one big place to me. And so and we do work together so much better these days than we used to. But I really believe that if we are going to make a difference for each other, for each community, that these cities are going to have to work with each other. If Biloxi needs something and needs Gulfport's help, Gulfport needs to help. If Gulfport needs help from Long Beach, Long Beach needs to help. Yes. Because if we all help and we all go to Jackson with one voice, it would be amazing what we could do.
And it's happening more and more. I love the photos when Fofo and Billy Hughes are together and they're working on some project together. And you see more communication happening along the coast than you've ever seen before. It's so good to see that.
It is. It's just heartening.
So now, what is next for Christy Pickering? Where do you go from here?
I don't know. I want to do more speaking. I am going to attend the National Publicity Summit that's put on by Steve Harrison. Steve Harrison is the gentleman that made Jack Canfield famous with his Chicken Soup for the Souls. Oh, yes. So I'm going to attend that in New York in October. And hopefully, and the whole goal is to get in front of more people so I can help more people. Mm-hmm. That's the whole goal.
Your firm, you're going to continue to have your firm for the foreseeable future?
Yes, that's where I make the money. So I'm going to have to keep being a CPA. So yes, I see that for a while.
What about your boards? You see yourself joining other boards along the way?
Possibly. I will be rolling off the Mississippi Power Company board this year, and I term out. They have a term, and I'll be sorry to leave that, but I understand the health of having that term. So yes, I'd love to join another board. We'll see what happens.
Sarbanes-Oxley that I mentioned a minute ago, your audit experience, now you have merger and acquisition experience. I can't imagine that you wouldn't be a sought after commodity.
Thank you.
And if you
corporate governance and nominating too.
Do I now?
Corporate governance and nominating.
Oh
too.
yeah, yeah. No, there's no doubt about it. And you will continue to be active in the community, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. I hope I can do more. You know, if I can find the time to do more of my what I call my personal philanthropy work, working with people, and if I can do more in the community, that's what I want to do. You know.
So we're coming to the end of our time together, but I think we really accomplished a lot. I wanted to make sure people understood, aside from your book, your story is so inspiring, and I hope that women will see that and be inspired by that. I wanted them to see that what you wrote about in your book, about claiming control of your story and then taking action and developing a plan and knowing that there's a way out so that people who are in abusive relationships can find hope and ultimately happiness.
Absolutely.
I wanted to get that. And then lastly, I wanted people to see that there's a common thread in all these people that we're interviewing, and that is a commitment to the community. And working in the community and having business success are not mutually exclusive. They're one and the same.
You have to have both.
If you're smart about that.
Yes.
So anyways, it's been incredibly inspiring. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today.
And I can't thank you enough. Congratulations on your new show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day and or a great weekend now. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Me?